Hi folks, and welcome once again to another episode of Remedial Civics, where we pick up where the public education system left off and give you sort of a primer on our Constitution and the laws of our society. I'm Alexander Haberbush, president of the Lex Rex Institute and a practicing constitutional attorney.
Oh, crap.
You forgot your name?
I did.
This is Alex Bostic.
Oh, thank you.
He's my assistant. He's supposed to do things like help me remember my name.
Yeah.
But sometimes that goes the other way.
Well, your name's all that's left in there. I just pushed
true.
everything else out.
Fair enough.
Look at these 3 words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words proudly saying, "We the people."
Okay, so let's get into it. This question comes from one of the YouTube comment sections. The question is, do labor laws apply to hiring judges and elected officials? There's sort of a voting reference there for how to apply those labor laws.
Yeah, so a couple ways to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
I think sort of what the person asking it is getting at is, do anti-discrimination laws apply to elected officials, judges in particular?
Sure.
I assume that's kind of what they're getting at. I think that, if I recall correctly, that question was asked back when Biden had first nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And I think because Joe Biden made some comments about how he wanted to put a black woman on the court.
That relate to discrimination.
Yeah, that's I think sort of what the person is intending to ask there is that discriminatory, and is he allowed to discriminate in that fashion? So, a few ways to go about answering that. There are several different kinds of law that apply to matters of discrimination. Mm-hmm. Your first is going to be, most broadly speaking, the 14th Amendment, which has an equal protection clause. It says nobody can be denied the equal protection of the law. Mm-hmm. 14th Amendment applies, rather, it's enforced by the federal government against the state governments. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't apply to private actors, private businesses, anybody like that. They are not involved in 14th Amendment as such. 14th Amendment only applies directly to the state government. It doesn't even apply to federal government. States can't deny persons the equal protection of the law. So obviously that wouldn't apply directly to judges, especially a federal judge. The Supreme Court justice is going to be a member of the federal government.
Sure.
Judicial branch. So that's not going to apply. The next level, and this is the most common kind of labor law, is going to be state labor laws.
Okay.
Every state's going to have different labor law. They're going to have their own requirements that they impose. I'm not going to get into that too much because I don't think that's really the focus of this question.
Right.
Unless you want me to talk about that. But what's going to be relevant for this question is federal employment law, which for our purposes is basically just going to be the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Okay.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 included, among other things, it included a lot of laws saying that you can't discriminate against people. So there were the public accommodations sections of that law saying that anybody who offers a public accommodation cannot be discriminatory against different people on the basis of race or religion or a number of other protected categories.
Right.
And that was... and that did apply to private actors. That applied both to state governments and to private actors in interstate commerce. Yeah. Because, that's pretty much the only way the federal government can outlaw discrimination is if it applies to
interstate commerce.
Things that are acting in interstate commerce. And there's some crazy rulings on that, like the Katzenberg case that said that a restaurant that serves predominantly in-state patrons using in-state food is still an actor in interstate commerce because people may visit the restaurant from out of state. Yeah. So, now for all intents and purposes, most private organizations are going to be considered to be covered by the Civil Rights Act. Right. But there are also employment sections of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's Title VII of the United States Code. And that's what basically creates the EEOC. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They're the folks that go around and make sure nobody's having discriminatory hiring practices. And I guess sort of our walk for a small drink of water that we're going to hit at this point is, if you turn to the definition section of Civil Rights Act 1964, Title VII, it explicitly says that an employer, or rather an employee, does not include somebody who is in an elected office or somebody who is appointed by a person in elected office.
They cut it out.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, the Civil Rights Act didn't apply to federal government anyway. That only applied against states and private entities. So it's kind of irrelevant when talking about Supreme Court nominees in the first place. But when we talk about lower court judges, same thing's going to apply, because most state court judges are elected. Even the ones that aren't are appointed by somebody who is elected. They're specifically given a carve-out in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because, well, it would pretty obviously be unconstitutional if it didn't have that carve-out, right? You know, the voters of a state or the voters of the United States want to be a bunch of racists. They're allowed to do that.
Or something else, but okay, I see.
Well, you know, they want to discriminate, they're allowed to do that.
Right.
And you know, there have been accusations leveled against the American electorate for exactly that kind of discrimination. And that's a valid campaign issue. You know, if you want to say that the electorate is being discriminatory in a way that they shouldn't, that's a valid matter for somebody to raise. But we certainly don't want a court to come along and say, we've decided the American people are a bunch of racists. We're going to invalidate their decision. You know, we've actually got a case we're working on right now for a legislator up in Alaska. It's not a discrimination case, but it's a guy by the name of David Eastman who is accused under one of those old McCarthy era, you know, Red Scare statutes that says you can't be a member of an organization that advocates the violent overthrow of the government. Well, he's a member of Oath Keepers, which isn't an organization that does that, but his opponents very much want to claim that it is. And they're saying that he shouldn't hold office even though he was duly elected because of that statute. Even if they were to win on the lower court, there's clear constitutional issues there because voters say has to be heard. So, you know, even if there are other laws saying voters are constrained to particular options, usually not going to be upheld end of the day.
Okay, that's good. That was a good answer. Thank you.
Oh, well, good. Thank you. And that's Alex mentioned, that's a question that we got from the YouTube comments. We do read those. If anybody else has questions they would like to ask, may take us several months to get to them, as it did this one. But we will look at those questions, and even if they're stupid, we'll answer them. That one wasn't. But,
no, okay.
You know, even
I just want to make sure you added that in. Okay, we're good.
The only reason we wouldn't is if they had like some kind of obscenity in them or something like that. But all right, folks, as always, do check out our website where you can, for a small donation, get any of these books that you see behind us, and you can support the constitutional work that we are doing to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Really, the only way that we can do that is with contributions from you, the viewer. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully you know a little bit more about our Constitution and the laws of our republic, at least a little bit more than you did before you clicked on this video. If you did learn something, please click like and hit subscribe. If you didn't, feel free to unsubscribe and hit dislike. That's that's fine too. We need that negative feedback so we know what you guys already know. All right. Thanks for listening, folks.
Have a good night.